So it has been created. The autism spectrum, the autism media compass, the associated to dissociated, normie to autist, human, inhuman, anti-human, post-human compass, which is really a name that rolls off the tongue very well. If you've seen Digibro's video where he talks about the levels of autism in anime and what anime are autistic or not, that's this line. Essentially, the more focused on databasing something is, the more autistic it is. So, the most autistic would be people who are really into Sonic, you know, those sorts of people, like Chris Chan levels or Thomas the Tank Engine. The sort of people who are more focused on their own ideas of what the show means than what the actual author intended, and can just become singularly obsessed with that sort of thing, just categorizing it into however many things. And the most normie thing would be like something that has a very traditional narrative and lots of spectacle and stuff, like a Marvel movie. And then you've got this extra axis I've added, which is associated to dissociated. Now, the thing in Digi's video is he says that the further you go along the autist line, the less interested in traditional narratives people get. But then the shows that he recommends tend to also, the shows that he gives as examples of more autist shows also tend to have narratives. They're just less interested in the narrative. So I've created this extra associated or dissociated thing. Now, I'd consider myself pretty well acquainted with this because I have a lot of dissociation. If you don't know what that means, it means, well, there's two types of dissociation. There's depersonalization and derealization. Depersonalization is when you feel like you're not real, and derealization is when you feel like the world isn't real. And I have a lot of that with both of them. I have it pretty much every day of my life these days. I don't know what that would be called. I don't think it's dissociative identity disorder, because then that would require you to be dissociated from your own identity, which is not what I have. So I'm not sure what that would be called, but that's what I have. I've tried to talk to people about it, but they just don't really care. I mean, like doctors and shit, they don't really seem to care about it that much, because they don't see it as affecting my life very much, because it's not like it's so common that it doesn't freak me out or anything anymore. But anyway, moving on from that depressing subject. So I'm just gonna explain these things for you. I'm gonna put an example in each of them so you can sort of see what I mean. So first of all, with the normie and the associated, that means something that is both very normie and very related to the real world, easily relatable to the real world. Now, when I say human, it doesn't necessarily have to have human characters. In fact, it often doesn't have human characters as a feature of it. For example, Dragon Ball would be right up there, and most shonen things, even though the characters in Dragon Ball aren't human, as far as I understand. They represent humanity, and the entire show is about them doing very human things, or something like you could call this humanist, in fact, instead of humanist, as in it's a sort of show about greatness, about reaching. All of those shonen things are about the monomyth, you know, the hero's journey, or anything that has a very hero's journey-ish narrative goes in this top column, probably in here. Anything with a very hero's journey-ish thing would go in here, because the hero's journey is something that is very human. It's it appeals to everything humans see themselves as, even if it's not an accurate representation of what real life is. That is how people see their own lives, regardless. That's the lens, that is standard for humanity to see itself through. So anything like Dragon Ball Z or that sort of stuff would go in here. As for anti-human, it would be, these labels are kind of weird. I'm not sure why I put them there. They make sense to me, but I'm not sure I think it might just be confusing for other people. So the more dissociated things would be something that is, even though something could be normie, like something could be relatively easy to or appealing to the vast majority of people. Something could be quite you know what, I'm going to use music for some of these as well, because music is something I know more about than anime, or I can interpret easier than anime. Uh, so I'm going to use music examples for this as well. This would be like your Vivaldi, maybe not Vivaldi. This would be your what's that fucking guy's name? Oh fuck, how have I forgotten his name? The composer, the guy that all film scores are based off of these days. There's lots of them. This would be your okay. This would be your Beethovens. This would be your Mozarts and your Bachs and your um. Actually, maybe not Bach. Definitely not Bach. This would be. It's kind of hard. Why am I using classical music as an example of this? I'm in all sorts of places right now. You know, your Ed Sheerans and shit. This would be like, yeah, this is like Britney Spears' Toxic. This is that. This is the song Toxic by Britney Spears. This is something that is uh, not necessarily interested with the metatextual level like a more autistic thing would be. It's not really interested in the metatext, but it's also not really interested in being very humanist. So something like Black Rock Shooter would be down here. Something like uh take K-On! For example would probably be maybe around here. Because it's not very interested in actually maybe K-On's a bad example, but some of those cute girl shows like Nichijou would definitely be here, because it's not very interested in an accurate portrayal of human life, or a like hero's journey portrayal of human life, but it's also not very interested in its own metatext. It is a little bit. It's like a play on, hey, look, uh, what if we put shonen animation in a cute girls show? But at the same time, it's not super autistic. It's just like here. It's on the same level as like one, maybe a little further than One Punch Man, maybe on a level of with One Punch Man in autism, but it's definitely much less interested in heroes and shit like that. So that would definitely go more in this anti-human kind of level, in this more dissociated level. Um, the world is much more surreal. That's a good indicator of if something is associated or dissociated. The more surreal, the more Dadaist things are, the closer they are to this level. Dada would be like the ultimate down here type of shit, you know. Things that are very dissociated from classical ideas of, or not really classical ideas, because there's some classical art that I would class as dissociated, like some plays and shit. But let's move on. Inhuman, or the autist and associated. So this is something that is has made the ideas of humanism. It's taken them out and replaced them with something else. It's still on a level where it's related, strongly related, defined by its relation to the human, is a good way to say it. It's defined by its association to real life, but it is too autistic to be human. Something like, I would put Neon Genesis Evangelion episodes 25 and 26 probably around here. I would put Fooly Cooly up here. Actually, no, Fooly Cooly's too surreal. Maybe this is kind of hard, you know. All those. Okay, here's what I put. The stuff that goes in here is the stuff like Sonic and all that shit that people get really obsessed with. The autistic. They're so, like, if you look at the way Shadow behaves, for example, as a person, it's like a warped, twisted idea of what a human is, but the entire point of his character is defined by his relation to what an ordinary person thinks. like something like psychopaths would be in here. It's about analyzing different types of people who differ from the human, and a world that differs from the world that we live in a way that is not targeted to, or it's kind of coldly looking at humanity from the sort of perspective an autist would, but still very interested in humanity. Maybe inhuman wasn't the best word to use for this, but it's very. Psychopath is a great example of this, something that would be like smack bang in the middle of here, or maybe like here or something. That it's a kind of cold analysis of what humanity is, coming from a non-normie perspective, not coming from a perspective of the hero's journey. And then you got your post-humans. This is where Lane is. This is where Enderweaver is. Very much we're down in the dissociated, surrealist kind of place, a dreamlike look. This is where Kanini... Actually, I'd put Kanini Sasawarate in here. Actually, maybe like a here. Maybe like a here. Or maybe like a here, I mean. Like a Kanini Sasawarate, it's somewhere between these two. I'm talking about that because I just read it recently and thought it was really good. Something like... Okay, let's compare the two of these. So if you take Lane, which is probably the archetypical post-human thing, or in terms of music, I would put Bach here, right? Because his music is very mathematical and focused on God and shit like that, and all these rules and stuff. Very autistic, but also it's very much it's an observation of holiness and religion, which is it perfectly fits in here. Whereas something down here would be something more like your experimental, like Stravinsky type guys, you know, or if you want to talk modern music, your Shinsei Kimata-chans, your Sophies, the people that do what's the word? Metatextual. They play with the metatext a lot. They go beyond what is... All noise music is here. Or here. Some noise music is here. The sort of dark ambient, neo-folk, industrial noise stuff is more here. The sort of Japanoise type shit is more here. But sometimes it's not. Yeah. I hope I'm making sense. In terms of a narrative, this is things that are completely uninterested in essentially playing with the real world. They don't care about the real world. All they care about is playing with their own genre and their own metatext. I would put what's that fucking guy's name? Charlie Kaufman film. I think every Charlie Kaufman film goes in here pretty solidly. Very much everything is a metaphor. Even if it's not intended by the author, everything is a metaphor. Post-human, dissociated, autistic, databases, living in the database, whoa, dissociated, all that shit, all that good shit. You know, but I say that as if these two are like inherently worse, but they're not. Like, there's stuff, as I said, so like it makes it seem like the more artsy you get, the more post-human you get, but that's not true. A lot of artsy shit could be in any of these genres. Actually, probably less so in the normie side of things, but it could basically be in any of these. In fact, it could even be here, but I'm not sure how it would work, but it probably could. But artsy art house shit is probably gonna stick to around like this kind of area, you know, this side of the more autistic side. But it doesn't have to be dissociated. It can be very associated. Artsy shit can be very much a commentary on human. Maybe Charlie Kaufman would go up here, actually, now that I think about it. Maybe not. Maybe it's like a sort of here kind of level. Sort of here kind of level. Maybe a sort of here kind of level. Maybe. I'm not really sure. I don't know how this works. I just made it up. So to take Digi's example, something like Horizon in the Middle of Nowhere, I think that's what that show's called, that would be here, because it takes the same look at the human, the relationships between all these complex characters and shit, all these very specific autistic characters, instead of a normie thing, which would be more like the normie version of Horizon at the Middle of Nowhere would be the Avengers, right? But you ramp that specific powers shit up from like to infinity, and you get the autistic version, but it's still a human story about these interactions between these inhuman things. It's a very cold, weird, warped perspective on it, but it's not surreal in any way. Whereas something like you can still something like Lane, for example, because that's what I've been using as post-human this whole time, is it's a even though it's a look at a particular human, it's only interested in the things that make it not human. It's not interested in the I don't even think Lane is very interested in the failure to communicate. I think maybe it shows it, but I don't think it's very interested in the failure to communicate. It's more interested in the why does anyone really care that Lane can't communicate, or the sort of like what is it that causes like what even is communication? That's that sort of stuff. That's more here. Am I making sense? I don't know if I'm making any sense. Hopefully you can make sense of this. I'm sorry. I'm not good at explaining myself.